Hello, hi, welcome to another BookTube video. This one's slightly different to what I've been doing recently, but I've been thinking I want to get a little bit more involved with BookTube again, like I was maybe a couple of years ago. So this video is my top 10 novels of all time. This video is inspired by Katie from Books and Things, who has just released a video a few days ago about The Guardian's top 100 novels of all time. And Katie is looking at compiling her own list, her own 100 top novels of all time, asking for people on BookTube to give their own top 10s. And that's not just BookTube creators, but also people who enjoy watching BookTube, everyday sort of readers. Because the criticism slightly being that The Guardian, who composed their own list, has asked, very literary writers, academics, and critics. So there's quite a lot of literary fiction on there. There's a lot of books on there as well that you would expect to find. There's a lot of books on there that I've read, that I've enjoyed. But the idea behind Katie's survey is that, asking sort of more everyday readers who enjoy, fiction, historical fiction, the classics on BookTube, is going to maybe result in a different sort of top 100. So I've compiled my top 10 and I've submitted it on the survey. I'm going to include the link to Katie's video in the comments here. And if you go to that video, in the description of that video, you'll find the link to complete that survey. And I think it'd be brilliant if as many people as possible can complete that survey, and we can see kind of what a real top 100 would look like from everyday sort of readers. So without further ado, this is my top 10 that I submitted for that survey. At number 10 is, surprisingly to me anyway, the book that came top of the Guardian's 100, and that is Middlemarch by George Eliot. I actually really enjoyed this. I know some people, especially Katie, are maybe slightly indifferent to it, but to me, I found this really fascinating. So like I mentioned a few years ago, the reason I really enjoy sort of Victorian literature and the classics is because it transports me back to a time that just feels like I'd enjoy a whole lot more than modern society. And Middlemarch is just the epitome of, provincial life in the Victorian era. It's just, not a lot happens. It's not very exciting. It's not very saucy, but, altogether it's quite a complex plot all drawn together. But I really enjoyed it. I don't know what else I can say. Right? It's a hefty go, but yeah, I really enjoyed it for the time it took me back to. And I will admit, on my top 10, I think they are all considered classics, and there's a few post-Victorian and pre-Victorian novels on there, but I haven't included anything modern as such. And to me, there's maybe a difference between my favourite top 10 novels and what I consider the top 10 novels of all time. I was considering about putting maybe the New Life from Tom Crew on there, but when I consider is that what I would consider being in the top 10 novels of all time, I don't know, in my own personal top 10, probably. But this is what I consider maybe to be, from my point of view, what I've read, what I've enjoyed, the top 10 of all time. So yeah, that was number 10. In at number 9 is an Anthony Trollope novel, and that is Barchester Towers. I really enjoyed this. I need to get back on to the Chronicles of Barsetshire. I am going to plan on reading the next book in the series Dr. Thorne very soon in the next few months. Barchester Towers I really enjoyed. I think if anyone's new to Anthony Trollope, it's not overly long, and it's quite enjoyable. There's some really interesting plots that are interwoven, some really funny, interesting characters, almost Dickensian characters that I really enjoyed. It's definitely a step up from The Warden. So The Warden is the first book in the Chronicles. This follows on from The Warden. I would guess it's probably nice to read The Warden before reading this, just to get a bigger picture of what's going on. I don't know if it's a necessity, but The Warden itself is very short. It's, I don't know, it was like, handful of pages, like 170 maybe. I could have made that up, but it's not very long, so you can get through that and then go on to this. But that is my number 9. In at number 8 is a Jane Austen novel. It's the only Jane Austen novel I've got on here. So I don't want people to be upset that I haven't maybe included their favourite. It's just probably because I haven't read their favourite, because I've only read 2 Jane Austen novels. One of them is not on this list, but I still enjoyed it. But the one that has made this list at number 8 is Sense and Sensibility. I really love this for my first Austen, to be fair. I know like the more popular Pride and Prejudice and maybe Persuasion. I haven't read those. They may be, you know, I may find them more interesting than this when I do. But for me, I really like this as my first foray into Austen. Quite enjoyable. I really kind of engage with the characters, the sisters. Really wanted to know what was going on with their life. You know, shared their passions and their upsets when they happened. So yeah, I really love that. In at number 7 is my first Bronte novel, and this is quite weird because once again, if I were looking at my own personal top 10, this book would come higher than a book that is higher in this list, which I know makes no sense. But in what I consider the best top 10 of all time, my first Bronte novel is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. This for me would go above Wuthering Heights in my personal favourite, but when I kind of look, take a seat back and look, you know, at the bigger picture, you know, when we look at the writing style of Wuthering Heights, the effect it had on, you know, the Victorian reader at the time, you know, how it might have been a bit risque, how it's a bit sort of, you know, love it or hate it. So, you know, it's a bit higher on this list. I've given a spoiler away there. But in my own personal favourite, I love The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. You know, it's like a bit of a mystery going on. It's still pushing that Bronte narrative of, you know, powerful woman doing something that she, you know, maybe wouldn't necessarily be doing in the Victorian era, you know, kind of a bit saucy, a little bit, well, I say saucy, not so much in this book, but, you know, we've got a woman here who turns up to a village with her children on her own, and there's this mystery about, well, you know, where's the father, what's going on there, and then the backstory of why she's in that village. You know, you didn't have women writing about, you know, domestic violence at the time as much, and, you know, it was something that Victorian readers didn't want to hear about, especially the men. You know, they wanted to quiet that down. They didn't want, you know, they wanted to be able to do this stuff in private. They didn't want it plastered all over, you know. So yeah, that's why I also think it's quite an important novel for the time, but I really enjoyed it. Loved The Tenant. So yeah, that is number 7. 7. It's number 7. In at number 6, we've got my second Trollope novel. This is the first Trollope that I ever read, and this was for Victober a couple of years ago now, which cemented my love of Victorian literature, and that is The Way We Live Now. Is it very complex in terms of the plot? There's a lot going on, but it's all very highly enjoyable. The characters are fabulous. Yeah, the Melmots are just, yeah, something else, but it's really engaging and fun to follow everyone's story, especially the rise and fall of the Melmots. And yeah, it's just, yeah, even though it's a little bit bigger, you know, we're on the 800 page sort of mark with this one. Yeah, I flew for it. I really enjoyed this one. So yeah, I wouldn't say this is also maybe a good place to start with Trollope. I haven't read any of his others at the moment, apart from, I say, The Warden and Barchester Towers. But yeah, not a bad place to start if you're a Trollope virgin. We are now breaking into the top 5. And at number 5, we have my next Bronte novel, and that is Wuthering Heights. As I said, in my personal list, Tenant would be above this, but as looking from a bigger picture, you know, what would be, or what I consider the top 10 novels of all time, I would put Wuthering Heights above Tenant, just because of the impact at the time it was released, the subject matter, the themes, you know, very dark. Once again, we are touching on a bit of domestic violence in general, but still pushing this sort of female heroine as well, and not just in Cathy, but in her daughter as well. So yeah, I read this. I think this is the quickest I've ever read sort of a average length novel. I read this in 2 days, and that was while I was working both days as well. I was, you know, just couldn't put it down in the meantime. So yeah, that is my number 5, Wuthering Heights. In at number 4, we have my only Dickens in this list, and that's not because I dislike a lot of Dickens, it's just because I've only read a handful. I think this and Our Mutual Friend. Our Mutual Friend was an honorary mention. I did really enjoy that. I loved the intricacy of the plot. but the other novels in my top 10 just just nudged it out of the top 10. But here at number 4 we have Great Expectations. This was my first Dickens full novel. I've read, or had read, Christmas Carol before that, but in terms of full-length novel, and I just love this. I adore this. It's just, yeah, it's typical Dickens from what I've read. These interesting, quirky characters, really engaging plot, and I've really loved the adaptations that I've watched of it as well. A couple, is it Gillian Anderson we had as Miss Havisham one? And then the most recent with Olivia Colman. Both of them I really loved. The more recent one kind of changed it up a little bit with, the ending and a bit of the narrative in the middle as well. But yeah, I think this is probably a great place to start for any Dickens virgin, because it's not too long either when you compare it to the length of, Bleak House, which is staring at me on my shelf, which may be the next Dickens that I read. But Great Expectations, yeah, great. We're now cracking into the top 3, and 2 and 3 may be a bit of a surprise for some people, but these novels have had a bit of an effect on me. I really enjoy them. I was deeply connected to the reading experience as I was going through it. And at number 3 we have a D.H. Lawrence novel, but not the novel that was in The Guardian's top 100. I believe it was The Rainbow that was in that top 100, which I haven't read. I have it on my shelf. I do want to read The Rainbow and Women in Love, because I loved this book so much. But at my number 3 is Sons and Lovers. This is really gritty, and the relationship between the main character and his mother, it's one of those, you kind of, it does push boundaries. It's a bit sort of, it is a bit risque, in when you look at the time it was written and released. But yeah, I just found it so engaging, and yeah, it made me want to read more of Lawrence. So I will at some point pick up The Rainbow and Women in Love. But yeah, I highly recommend Sons and Lovers. It's such a dark, gritty look at that relationship, that familial relationship, especially between a mother and her son, the relationship within the whole family, the siblings, and the father as well, and how when the main protagonist wants to, build relationships of his own, he comes up against this wall because of his mother. It's, I think it's fabulous, and that's why it's my number 3. And at number 2, which I haven't done a video for this book, which I probably should do, but I know I'm going to reread it again at some point, so I'll do it when I reread it. But I love this book, and what's quite strange is then when I watched an adaptation of it, I loved it even more. And not just the adaptation, I love the film that I watched of this book, but it also made me enjoy the book posthumously after I watched the film. I enjoyed it a lot more. Anyway, at my number 2 is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. It's just, it's the themes and the context of it are so relevant for the time it was written, but it's quite daunting as well, that sort of relationship about looking at love in different aspects, sort of a loving relationship that you could look at and say, oh, that's really lovely and whatever, but also looking at how actually it's quite materialistic in certain aspects, and for some people unachievable. And I really loved the film with Tobey Maguire and Leonardo DiCaprio. I thought Leonardo DiCaprio was brilliant as Gatsby. It's almost like he read the book and thought exactly the same way as I did about the character of Gatsby, and portrayed him exactly how I imagined him to be as I was reading the book. And yeah, this had quite a profound effect on me as I was reading it, and partly because I was starting the A-level and this was studying it a bit more in depth, but understanding it on another level, it just, it spoke to me, and that's why that is my number 2. So in at number 1, I don't think this will be any surprise to anyone who's sort of followed my videos from the beginning. This is the book that got me into BookTube. This is the book that got me into Victorian literature. This still holds a very special place in my heart, and it is the final Bronte novel on this list, and that is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. This is just, I still love it. I need to do a reread, to be fair, because I haven't reread it in a couple of years, but it's just one of those, it just opened my world up to this, era of books that I'd never even touched, or just, I was like, how have I not read these before? But yeah, it opened up my world to this endless amount of possibilities in terms of literature. Has a profound effect on me. And once again, we've got this strong storyline of a strong, powerful female character doing things that maybe would have, had the Victorian men turning their noses up at a book like this. And indeed they did at the time. Obviously the Bronte novels, the main three, and I think Agnes Grey, were published under male pseudonyms at the time, or not so much male pseudonyms, but very gender bending. What's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word. It's escaped me, but you know what I mean. Gender non-conforming names, sort of type, like Acton Bell and Currer Bell. So yeah, at the time they published them under those pseudonyms because they had an idea the response to these sort of novels written by a woman would not be great. And when Charlotte finally came out after Anne and Emily's death, there was a bit of a backlash finding out that these novels that people loved, that flew off the shelves, were written by women. But that is my number one. Anyway, so that is my top 10. That is the top 10 I've submitted to Katie's survey. If you want to take part in the survey, as I said, in the description of this video, I shall link the video to her Top 100 Guardian video, and in the description for that video you will find the link to the survey, and you can fill in your top 10 then. I just think it would be great if as many people as possible could take part in the survey and get an idea of actually what would be the top 10 of people on BookTube, not just the creators but the viewers of BookTube as well. Anyway, that's that video. Thanks for watching. Until next time, bye.